May I ask where you got wounded? In the war? Yes, I got shot in the ass.
Lee Marvin has millions of Americans.
Will be remembered always as the tough
man with the recognizable voice, that scarred face and silent confidence.
That made it all seem real. He was sending troops into impossible
struggles, all by himself against
perilous outlaws, or giving dry. Marvin never looked at humor in Cat Ballou as if he were playing. He looked like a guy
who had really gone through every hardship he
characters swept away. That genuineness made him one of the largest respected stars, but also hit a extremely intimate heart that very few people anybody ever did comprehend.
Long before he was an Academy Award
winner, Lee Marvin had been living forever changed the way experiences that he saw life.
His service while the Second World War left a physical and
emotional scars that never quite vanished. Fame came later, but unlike so many celebrities in Hollywood, he
never really felt comfortable with
it.
He liked quiet conversations better than
glam parties,
wide landscapes to red carpets and faithful
pals to enormous parties.
Beyond the Hollywood ultimate image,
tough guy was a man who put a premium on honesty, true affection, and a lot more loyalty. More than applause.
But his personal life was rarely
easy. There were connections that
started off with hope and finished with heartbreak.
There were women who ignited a fire in him, questioned him, and helped to mold distinct chapters of his extraordinary journey. Some came into his life through
Hollywood and others stood by him
long before success came or stayed. When the cameras stopped rolling, all left their lasting mark, but not in the way as well.
And as the years passed, Marvin retreated
from Hollywood to a simpler existence. He
wanted, he got more than he had
thought about the decisions he had done.
His friends saw that he spoke less
about awards and famous movies and more
on the folks who had actually mattered. He recognized that success could never replace the security of someone who loved you
when the spotlight went out. Today we look back on the women
who turned Lee Marvin's life around, from unforgettable co-stars to lovers
who stood by him during his biggest
triumphs and his most difficult struggles.
And by the end of this story we will know
the lady many believe to have become the
greatest love in his life, the one who
brought Hollywood's most hardened leading man something he had striven for all his life:
peace. As the audience watched Cat Ballou in 1965, they thought Lee Marvin would put in another commanding performance
as a gunfighter of steely.
Instead, they saw something quite different. Marvin, too.
Remarkable roles, mixing humor,
Western grit in a performance so striking that it gave him the Best Actor Academy Award. Across from him was a young, intelligent actress who was
confidence to match his own, Jane Fonda.
The two could not have at first sight felt more different. Marvin was a battle-hardened veteran in his mid-40s.
She walked with the silent
confidence of one who had already lived many lifetimes. Fonda, more newer than a decade younger, was a Hollywood's creative talent. She was hardworking, educated, and
set to forge a career for herself.
But their differences become one of the film's biggest strengths. Marvin was quick on found. Fonda was something most performers never attain: full dedication to every scene. She
was never scared of his reputation or his Oscar-worthy presence.
But instead, she dared herself to go up to him as a equal. Marvin liked that. Professionalism. He thought big things. Performances evolved from trust between actors instead of competition.
And Fonda had earned that trust, virtually.
Now, their chemistry helped make Cat Ballou into one of biggest surprises of the decade. Marvin's unforgettable of Kid Shalene's characterization is still cinema's finest comedy performances. But he repeatedly admitted that the cast him did that success without strong companions on screen, even the best actor not to be able to shine fully. The relationship away from the cameras, standing between Fonda and Marvin, friendly and respectful, there were no genuine reports of romance between them, despite the occasional tabloid speculation. Instead, they went past something potentially far more precious in mutual adulation without Hollywood unneeded drama. In a field that is often brimming with competition and big egos, that level of respect was not common. Years later, cinema historians still to commend the singular balance they all together. Fonda provided the warmth, intelligence, and the idealism of youth to narrative, and Marvin contributed experience, robustness, and unpredictability, genuineness. Their styles of contrast never had a clash. They complemented each other in ways that affected the film. Unforgettable. Jane Fonda was for Lee Marvin one of the best professional partnerships in his career. She told him that superb acting was not about owning a scene, but to make everyone around you become better. It was a treasured lesson over his career and a reason he always talked about her with real respect. But while Jane Fonda became one of Lee's the most noteworthy co-stars of Marvin, the next woman to come into his personal life in a far more complicated manner, bringing both joy and one of the greatest Hollywood's bitter courtroom disputes history. By the early 1970s, Lee Marvin had one of the most in Hollywood already leading men of fame. His Academy Award cemented his role among the best in the industry, and his rough as was popular as image ever. But away from the film sets, a new chapter in his personal life was beginning, which would be much more famous than either of them would have dreamt. Michelle Triola came into Marvin's life. Was a time when he was looking for friendship other than the draining Hollywood world. Clever, confident, and fiercely independent, she rapidly became part of his important everyday existence. They never married, but made a partnership that lasted for living together, traveling many years together, living much like a married couple would pair. Michelle, known to her friends as Michelle, as one who knew Marvin's complex personality. He may be, over long periods, extremely quiet, private, and uncomfortable with the attention that came with stardom. Michelle accepted those traits instead of attempting to make him into. They did appear for some time truly happy, building a life together away from the Hollywood premieres, the eternal glow of, and studio events. But over the years, the relationship became more and more pressed. Marvin's pressures, career together with the reality of two powerful personalities, gradually made some space between them. They are at last parted, neither could have. That the breakup would become one of the most important legal cases featuring unmarried couples in the American
history. Michelle filed a lawsuit alleging that she devoted years of her life to
supporting Marvin and trying to create,
with the understanding in their house, thought they would spread the wealth built up throughout their partnership. The case attracted national attention almost
right away. Newspapers around America followed each advancement, and television commentators argued whether
partners who live together long-term should have marriage privileges comparable to those of
spouses. The suit was at last brought into the Supreme Court of California, though Michelle didn't get everything she wanted. The decision created a major legal principle. Courts might
acknowledge agreements not married
partners in some circumstances, even without being married. Through the nation, the case was so notorious that
soon similar claims came to be called
palimony instances, a term that came into the because of American legal vocabulary.
For Marvin, it was painful.
He had kept his private life under lock and key, but suddenly intimate aspects of his own personal relationships had been discussed in publications and courtrooms throughout the country.
It was the sort of public attention he devoted his entire career to,
attempting to get away from. Not much, despite the controversy. Doubt that Michelle Triola had an essential and meaningful part in a chapter in Marvin's life. She suggested companionship in years when he career was still on a roll, and together they lived experiences that no one would ever recall. But in the long run, their story was no longer about love,
and more on a legal bequest that
American family law altered forever. Tabloids sometimes tried to do romantic stuff surrounding legendary co-stars. There has never been any solid evidence that Lee Marvin
and Angie Dickinson were off engaged
from the camera. What was in between them was something else, and
more lasting, in many respects really artistic
respect. Marvin admired Dickinson for her didn't want to depend on glamour alone, whilst Hollywood exaggerated her beauty. He recognized the discipline behind her performances. She knew how to transmit emotion via constraint,
something Marvin cherished in his
own performance. Neither performer thought that better is louder always.
Instead, they relied on quiet
expression and timing to tell the tale.
Later, film critics appreciated Point Blank as one of the great crime flicks of its day, and a fair share of that praise
focused on the compelling tension between Dickinson and Marvin. Theirs scenes together had emotional heft, especially since neither actor was trying to outdo the other. Rather, they erected every interaction with mutual trust, allowing the audience to experience the complex history between their characters without superfluous explanation. In later interviews, Dickinson often said good things about Marvin's professionalism. She said he was serious about his craft, generous with his art, fellow performers, and dedicated to making each scene to be true as feasible. Those comments mirrored the reputation Marvin had been earning quietly all along. Hollywood.
Beneath the forbidding outside was an
actor who recognized brilliance wherever he found it, discovered it. For Lee Marvin, Angie Dickinson was the kind of colleague that everyone actor expects to find but once in a career.
She challenged him, raised the bar of creativity, the performances on her, and helped
Make a movie that lasts. Admired decades ago, they did not.
Romantic partnership was never founded on,
but admiration that lingered long after the filming was complete. But with all the friendships, the popular co-stars, and the partnerships that developed different, there was one woman in his life. His presence brought in Marvin. Something he had been searching for since coming home from combat. She didn't
merely share his accomplishments, she had his portion of it. Quietest years. His last chapter and the peace he had long been desiring.
That was Pamela Feeley Marvin.
When Marvin met Pamela Feeley, he
was no longer the young striving actor to make his way in Hollywood. He'd already has an Academy Award, a box office star, and one among the greatest faces that we see in American movies.
From the outside it looked like he had
got all a guy can wish for.
But those who knew him well knew that success had never been the thing he
highly treasured. Pamela had fallen into his life without effort to change the man behind the myth. She's didn't care about Hollywood parties, public notice, or the relentless chase of fame. Instead, she offered Marvin
something he'd been after for years,
an existence that seemed real. After many years of training, living under the public gaze,
such sort of peaceful companionship meant
more than any award could.
The two married in the early 1980s, and
together they had made a conscious choice: spend most of their time away from the heart of the entertainment industry, instead of accepting the glamorous lifestyles of many celebrities. Followed, they settled in Arizona, where
Marvin could like ranch life, open
scenery, and the privacy that he had
always cherished.
Friends often visited them at home, saw how different Marvin appeared there.
The hard-edged screen image
vanished. Instead of the frightening,
they found a man, a Hollywood tough guy,
who liked simple discussions, cared strongly for his animals, appreciated the outdoors, and found happiness in everyday routines. She was urging Pamela to a gentler life, without asking him to become even once someone he wasn't. As Marvin increasingly decreased, Pamela, in the mid-1980s, stayed always at his side. The bodily strength which had marked so many of his renowned personalities gradually yielded to the realities of age and illness.
For the guy who had earned a reputation on
resiliency, embracing such changes must have been a struggle. But he didn't confronted them alone.
She safeguarded his privacy during those
hard years so he can live with dignity, instead of turning his intimate problems out into public show. Hollywood loves to celebrate people in moments of triumph, but real devotion comes across in moments of frailty. Pamela's unswerving presence showed loyalty of a sort that can't be measured in soundbites or awards. When Marvin died in August, Pamela was there at the age of 63, 1987. During the last phase of his life, she told not only his happiest moments, years after Hollywood, yet the greatest hard ones. Audiences, while the fearless soldier remembered rough cowboy and the indelible anti-hero, she understood the reflective,
sometimes vulnerable man hiding behind himself.
Those legendary performances. Looking back now, you can see why many. Pamela was a buddy of Marvin's, embodied the greatest affection of his life. Other links had been important.
One, Betty had told him his years of
Hardship before fame. Michelle had took up a dramatic chapter that went section of the history of American law. Jane Fonda and Angie Dickinson had
contributed to unforgettable experiences on
Monitor. But Pamela provided him what none of those relationships would give: the fully lasting peace. The best thing in the end about Lee Marvin's success not being the Oscar prize proudly acquired, or the famous movies that remain entertaining audiences for decades now. It might have been discovering one person with who he no longer had a part to play. After a lifetime playing hardest
men of Hollywood, he eventually discovered the place where he could just be himself. Lee Marvin built his career playing men
rarely expressed fear or remorse or sensitivity. He looked almost on screen impossible to crack. But his own story shows us that even the toughest people spend their life looking for affection, loyalty, and a place that they belong, really. Every lady in his life gave him a other direction. Jane Fonda challenged him as an artist and helped to create one of
the best performances of his career.
Angie Dickinson showed that mutual respect may produce unforgettable movie theater. Betty Ebeling was standing by him
when success was not guaranteed,
sharing the hard years before
Hollywood saw his talent.
Michelle Triola became part of his most discussed chapters. Personal life, leaving a legal legacy, which went well beyond their relationship. But it was Pamela Feeley Marvin who stayed by him when celebrity was no more mattered. She showed him the calm life he had always stood, guarded his privacy, and wished with him to the very end. In a lot of
ways, she was the solution to a
question Lee Marvin had been posing since he came back from war. Where, at last, can a man find peace? Perhaps this is the reason for the story of Lee Marvin still rings true with audiences today. Behind every iconic was a man who was so many performances
of us learned that the greatest
victories are not won in the lights
or in front of applauding audiences. They are found at home beside the person who chooses to stay when the applause
has faded. And maybe it is the legacy worth remembering most. Not only that, Lee Marvin became one of Hollywood's
greatest stars, but that after a career of battles, both on film and
off, he finally found the love that gave him the peace he had been yearning for all along.